Thank you for joining Foster Strategies Group's Automotive Masterclass, Transforming Automotive. We're here today to talk about digital marketing and, more importantly, SEO, and building a strong foundation in 2019, leaning towards 2019 in your SEO efforts. In order to help us today, we are thrilled to have Bill Jackson, Senior Digital Marketing Strategist from Maritz in St. Louis, where we are today. Bill, thanks for having us, and thanks for being willing to talk about this conversation.
Thank you.
It's real important that you understand right now what the tools and the technologies and the strategies are around SEO. Things have changed quite a bit over the years. In fact, Google just did a big change that was pretty public just a few months ago. And so it's important that you have the latest information at your fingertips for building and sustaining and strengthening your SEO efforts. Bill, what are you seeing today to help dealers really get a strong presence with their SEO?
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm seeing today is that dealers are really trying to get a bit too fancy with what they're trying to accomplish. The web providers today, for most of the auto dealers out there, are really accomplishing a lot of the technical back end with their platforms, and dealers are trying to employ a bit too much to get something accomplished and to work their dealership up in the rankings.
Why do you think they're doing that?
Well, I think a lot of it is it's exciting to try new things, and they want to try to overcome things that their competitive dealerships might be doing. For example, if you're a dealer in the St. Louis area, there's a good chance that you share the same web provider as 50 to 60% of the other dealers. And knowing that those same dealers have the same platforms, dealers, I think, are anxious to figure out what can take them to the next step. But a lot of times it's not the unique technologies or the unique tools, it's really the basics that can help a dealer succeed in the search engine landscape today. That whether it be paid search or organic search, a lot of it ties back to content and relevance and making sure that it's consistent across the web.
So, 10 years ago when I did my first SEO efforts, it was pretty simple. You just wanted to make sure you had words. You didn't want to get too clever and put the brand name of your vehicle, which some people found out the wrong way was a way to rack up some pretty expensive bills when it got to their SEM as well. But it wasn't that complicated, or at least we didn't think it was. And typically then, maybe somebody from the internet department was making those decisions. Tell me what you see today as far as the path to even figuring out that we need a new process, that we want to take this on, and tell me about the people that are involved with that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned kind of where it came from and the people that are involved. And I was dead center of that, where the dealership that I came from. So I was, fresh out of college. I started obviously in social media and working with community management, and eventually it turned into, oh, Bill knows how to use this, type of website or this technology. Maybe he can handle this. And eventually that led me to taking over some of the SEO efforts for a dealership just by kind of filtration down to my age and the fact that I was good with computers, which may not have been the best route. And I think that's pretty common across a lot of dealerships, is that somebody that's younger and a little bit more savvy with computers ends up just taking over these different tasks.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because very often, and that's part of why we're here today, very often things start to feel like they're getting away from us, and rather than learn what you need to know so that you can lead it right, many people are passing it off very often to someone. With all due respect, you probably didn't have a high level of influence at that point. So now you're having to come up with all these solutions, doing a lot of work, and that can actually get demotivating. And sometimes the questions then that we're asking as leaders aren't the right questions, or they're not giving the right path for people, or giving the people that are doing the hard work the chance to be an influencer in that seat at the table. Is there any chance that any of that happened?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's definitely important for obviously the leaders in any dealership environment to realize that just because it's something that is out of their understanding or out of their realm of knowledge, that just because somebody knows the device on which something happens, that doesn't mean they know the inner workings of how it should be designed. Luckily for me, I was able to kind of see that I knew just enough to manage it and monitor it, but I was definitely not the expert that should be the one that's in the HTML adjusting content and things like that. So what I kind of took upon myself, which I recommend most dealerships do, is make sure that you have somebody at the dealership level that at least understands what's happening and has the ability to monitor and measure it in the back end, and then rely on somebody that has a true technical expertise of SEO, whether that be a vendor or whether it be somebody else at the dealership or however it works. So then you can at least check their work in a limited sense.
So first, it sounds like it starts with people.
Yes.
So you've got to get the right people in place. You've got to make sure that they are not just a hand raiser or your default. You've got to make sure that they have the right attributes. What would be a couple of those attributes that we would want to know, not assume, that those people had that were going to be managing that.
Well, one thing that I think that was assumed of me that definitely should have been known is a good SEO strategist or writer, anything needs to be that. They need to be a writer because there is a lot of technical aspects to SEO still with markup and metadata and things like that. But a lot of the high value signals that you can push out from your website are still related to content. And writing good quality content and good organized blocks in a fashion that not only makes sense for a search engine to read, but makes sense for a human to read if they happen to stumble upon it. And that's something that I was individually was not that great at. So when it came down to saying, Bill, we need to write content and we need to write blogs, all these different things, I was not the best individual for that. And then I took it upon myself to make sure that we had that individual that has the ability to write great content and then make sure that it's obviously keyword dense and valuable for the dealership and for the search engines.
He's bringing up a really good point because many times we take things and we compartmentalize them into a bucket that isn't the bucket. Like this bucket has so many different things that go into it. And so somebody that might be incredibly computer literate and could write you code all day long, they're not a creative content strategist. Right. So that's an entire skill set that people truly go to college. It's part of a curriculum at universities now is developing content and content strategies. So these are very different personality profiles, very right. different attributes, but usually it's like, hey, Bill, since you're the computer guy, why don't you handle all of that? So it's happening a lot of places. If it's happening to you right now, don't be alarmed, there's hope, but we've just got to clean up some of these roles, and we'll talk about that a lot in our series here, but we got to clean up the roles and make sure we have the right person with the right level of influence on the right job.
Right.
Okay, keep going. Sounds like you had a great run there. Let's go. Let's hear some more about that.
Yeah, so in terms of the additional things that I kind of learned along the way is, I mentioned obviously a lot about content, which we dug into a bit, but one thing that I think dealerships are starting to learn today and has been around for quite a while is that Google and Bing and Yahoo are really putting a lot of effort on knowing the website platform and the company outside of just the website itself. So if you're hometown Mitsubishi in whatever hometown, obviously the content that you have on that site is fantastic and it's very valuable to the consumer and to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. But they're also focusing on the presence of that individual dealership or the website's company outside of that same website itself. And what I mean there is utilizing tools like Google My Business and Bing Places and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all these different things all now play into a search engine optimization strategy. One of the biggest things that needs to be accompanied with that strategy is the consistency across the board. So if you're hometown Mitsubishi on one listing, but you're hometown Mitsubishi in LA on another listing and you're Mitsubishi in hometown on another listing, what that does is that confuses the different listing services. So it's very important to make sure that there's just that consistency that's out there. Most SEO experts want to focus on this as kind of a number one priority for two reasons. One, obviously Google tells us to. That's half the reason why we do anything in this industry is because Google tells us it's the best bet. The second is for the consumer. Because if a consumer is going to all these different sites and finding discrepancies in names or addresses or phone numbers or things like that, it can really confuse them and frustrate them to the point to where they might just choose a different dealership or choose a different place to go to because they're not able to trust it based on their online research.
I'm really glad you brought up Google because with a lot of recent changes, a lot of people are getting recertified. I think I even saw some banners or some signage out here. Is it possible? Are you partners with Google, or tell me more about that?
Yes, we are Google Premier Partners. That is on the paid search side of things, but with that, we do have a bit of conversations with some of our reps and have the ability to dig in a little bit deeper on a little bit of the inner workings of Google. Obviously, they still hold their secrets and their algorithms and everything very closely to their heart, but just making sure that we're always involved in the conversation, it really helps us get a little bit closer to what's happening and then how we can prepare for that on the back end.
Very good. You know, some of the people that I'm working closely with today, Dealer Teamwork, Reunion Marketing, they all just went to a big convention. It's hard to believe there's like big conventions around right. Google launches and Google partners. Have you had a chance to attend any of these, whether virtually or live?
Virtually, the one that was recently, yes, it was Google Marketing Live. I believe it was just a couple weeks ago, and I attended a couple of the sessions virtually and then did a lot of the reading after the fact. So it's like 3 or 4 days of great content. So I kind of pick and choose a little bit what's most relevant to what we're delivering to dealers. But those events are fantastic. And Google makes a really good effort to make a presence at not just their own events, but obviously auto-specific ones. They always have a presence at NADA and Digital Dealer. And actually, back in the day, it's funny you mentioned Dealer Teamwork. I had attended a Google Marketing Summit at Mountain View with a few folks from there prior to when they were Dealer Teamwork. So Google has obviously always had a big influence, and we've made sure to take advantage of that.
So, a lot of these tools are out there, and the material, as I was even going through trying to do some things for this that we're doing, I wound up, just so you all know, like some of this information is truly at your fingertips. You don't have to do much. It doesn't cost you anything. So there are a lot of Google certifications that you can take right from your desktop at any point in time, probably even from your mobile, if that's what you had open. And I was really impressed by the caliber of the material, but the easy way it was disseminated. And I say that to you because for some of you who are out there going, I'm still not sure that I want to, overstep here and start encroaching on a land that I'm a little unfamiliar with, and up to this point have successfully avoided.
Right.
I want you to know there's a lot of information. You can shut your door to your office, pull the windows, close, and take a look, because it's not as scary as you think. If there's one thing I could do, I would be to rip the word internet off of some of this, because there seems to be some mystery for dealers that are really smart, running massive, wildly successful businesses. But this is a corner, and you can't get everything out of that corner of your business if you don't understand it better.
Right.
So let's go through a few more things that dealers should know. Yeah,
well, you mentioned the certification, so let's stay there for a second. So Google has obviously the Google Analytics certification, and then they have multiple levels of it too, which is really helpful for almost anybody within the dealership that touches anything related to leads coming in, or the website, or even third parties. Obviously, it gets you the inner workings of how to find certain metrics and reports within the Google Analytics platform, but just knowing that and reading through the material can help you have a basic understanding of essentially how web traffic works, and then what you can do to measure it. As an individual in a dealership, whether you're in the internet sales department or a GM or a sales manager, whatever it might be, the more you know about how these tools and technologies work, the more you can hold people accountable that you're paying to do the work on them. So I recommend that anybody at any level get involved in these courses. They are free, 100% free, and I actually personally on Fridays often I close my door and I renew any certifications that I might be lacking at that point in time. But then of course there's Google Ad certifications and all the different platforms that they run. All are super beneficial, even if you're not the individual that's actually in the technology running the different ad platforms.
So when it comes to Google certification and Google partnerships, there's a little bit of a difference there. Can you tell us about that?
Right, yeah. So actually becoming a Google partner or a Google Premier partner is actually a free process and program as well. Essentially what you need to do with that is prove yourself to Google that you're willing to do the things that follow their best practices and you have success with your clients. The difference between a partner and a Premier partner, there's two things. One is level of spend. The other is that performance metric. So making sure that you have quality campaigns that are built, that are driving traffic in the proper ways, that they're actually being managed appropriately, that proves to Google through their system that you're willing and able to be a partner in their program. And then they, of course, have a little bit of a benefit for agencies that are in that.
So I'm a dealer, and I think that I've listened closely to you. I'm I need to double down on this. I really need to pay attention to this whole arena. Do I hire somebody? Do I bring in an agency? What are your best practices for this?
Well, there's a mixture, and it kind of depends on the size of the dealership and the amount of individuals that you could employ to do it. I always think it's interesting to see when dealers have an individual that this is our paid search person, or this is our SEO person, or this is our Facebook person. What ends up happening is it ends up being one individual that knows a little bit of each, that can deliver a little bit of each as well. And unless you're a larger store or a very large group, the likelihood that you have that individual on staff that can really devote the right brain power to building correct campaigns and driving that traffic and reporting it back to those that matter is very unlikely. In today's world, agencies and all the different paid search vendors and SEO vendors that are out there, they have so much knowledge and they're dedicated to understanding that knowledge. So there should be no doubt that when you go to somebody to bring it, to hire for your dealership, that they know exactly what they're doing. Of course, you should always go through a vetting process and ask the right questions and things like that. But when it's somebody's 100% job to understand SEO or understand SEM, I don't have to worry about I'm taking a sales lead right now or I'm putting balloons in the car. I'm actually doing my 100% job all the time. So I always recommend that they work with a partner or a vendor to make sure that they have somebody that's dedicated to the job that's trying to get done.
Very good. Okay, so we're going to hire an agency. What would be 2 or 3 questions that I would want to be sure to ask? Remember, I'm a dealer that, like, I'm getting brave here,
right,
and I'm leaning forward. I'm doing all the things everybody told me to do, but I don't know the questions to ask to know that I'm getting the right company or agency in to help me. What should I ask?
Well, one of the things that a lot of our dealers actually ask is, who else in the market are we currently representing? And if the answer is a couple dealers, or if there's a few dealers that they mentioned that are in the same market, asking the vendor or the agency is, how will you help me stand apart from them, and how will you make sure that we're not all end up competing for the same traffic that's out there? And that sometimes as a vendor or a partner or an agency, that can be a difficult conversation. Luckily for a lot of vendors that are out there, and I keep saying vendors, but agencies and partners, luckily for a lot of them is they choose a strategy that limits the dealerships they have in each market, and that's something that we do as well. Now it would be fantastic to have 18,000 dealerships under our SEO belt, but it really benefits the quality of the service we're able to deliver and the ability to consult on it when there's a small select group of dealerships in each market that we're working in.
Okay, so we're in St. Louis right now. What would be an optimal number of dealerships, just so our audience can get an idea of dealers that you could help successfully without tripping over too many wires of other dealerships?
Well, and I keep saying this, it kind of depends, but sometimes if we represent a group, we can represent that entire group and be careful with how we represent it to make sure that we're not kind of hurting each other's individual stores.
Because that's a thing too we've run into, yes.
So there's groups obviously that have multiple duplicate brands, and we're making sure that we're having those conversations at the store level with the individual general managers and sales managers to make sure that, okay, what's the area of coverage that either the OEM has given you or your group has given you, and making sure that the content that we deliver is around that area of coverage. And then when it comes to an individual brand, we try to make sure that we're at least 1 or 2 DMAs away from the bigger brand that we have. And I know each OEM uses a different term, PMAs or areas of responsibility, whatever it might be. But our goal is that we don't represent this store right here and the store that's the next store that's neighboring it directly, that cover the same neighborhoods, that cover the same individuals, that use the same roads to get to the stores, because it's very difficult to have differentiated SEO content if they're in the same part of town.
So dealers, you just got a freebie from Bill there. Make sure that they're not tripping over themselves, because what we've seen, unfortunately, too, is some agencies that go and they sort of do a one-size-fits-all with SEO, and they think automotive as a category for St. Louis, let's say, and all of a sudden they're just peppering the market, and you're really getting watered-down results. And that's just not fair to any of the people falling under this umbrella.
Yeah, and knowing the market is really important for an agency that's delivering SEO. Obviously, the St. Louis market, since we're here, and I know the examples very well. If you were to search a St. Louis Ford dealer or a St. Louis Toyota dealer, yes, those are high-value terms, but knowing the individual market and the different neighborhoods and different cities and different boroughs and things like that can really benefit an SEO strategy. And while I'm currently located in the St. Louis market and obviously have a close knowledge of the different neighborhoods, we try to do this in other markets as well. So we go within Google Search Console to try to figure out what consumers are currently typing in. So if there's a certain neighborhood or a certain city or something like that that maybe isn't in the assumptive group of cities that we would be targeting, sometimes that will help us capture that. We also try to pull out data from Google My Business to find out where people are driving from, what directions they're putting in, and what cities they're coming from, and trying to work that into the content. And then finally, we make sure we have deep conversations with the dealer too. It's always fantastic when we can get a little bit of CRM data or sales data to determine what zip codes and what areas of town are really driving traffic, or maybe if there's an area that they're missing. But a lot of times a sales manager, of course, they're from the town that they're selling the cars in, they know the parts of town that they want to target as well. So we always take all those different tools or all those different pieces of knowledge into consideration when we're building our SEO strategy.
Very good. What about like the customer's reputation or other adjectives that the dealership is using in their brand? Do you recommend plugging those into their SEO as well?
It can be beneficial. It kind of depends. I know that there's a few dealerships that have maybe the major city name in their brand or their slogan or their logo or whatever it might be. But a lot of times that really doesn't provide a lot of SEO value. One of the dealerships that I used to work at, and it's no longer the slogan anymore, but it used to be short drive to great value. Now, in traditional marketing on billboards and TV, and even in some paid ad text, it might be beneficial because what you're doing is you're showing that we are providing great value, but we're a distance, and maybe there's something that's causing you not to come this way. But having phrases like that in the SEO don't really build that much value because there's nothing that the consumer or the search engine is going to learn from that phrase without any context.
So this goes back to my theory that one size does not fit all.
Right.
And so just because something is a great asset that could be, like you said, like a super visual, I mean, it really implants it in my mind. You know, I'm just driving a short distance and people can see that journey, or whether it's about the customer experience they're going to get there, or whatever it is, that doesn't mean that it's going to work in every single aspect of your advertising efforts. Right. So when we're marketing, we've got to make sure that just because we like elements of our brand or pieces of marketing that have worked other places, they may not work everywhere. Great point. When we're thinking about our leadership in let's just stay in automotive retail. So would you say that the people that are helping craft those decisions right now have enough influence right now at the dealerships, or do we need to work on that a little bit?
The folks that are crafting the SEO decisions?
Yes.
I would say as a whole, probably not.
Okay.
I still think it's kind of an undervalued position and undervalued strategy within an overall marketing strategy driving traffic. But really, when you look into the metrics and the analytics behind most of the dealer websites, organic traffic still drives the vast majority of traffic and the vast majority of quality traffic to dealerships. And to take advantage of that and try to build on it is really important to a dealership success in the long term. But as for those individuals and even the agencies that represent the SEO strategies, I do not think that they currently have the strength that they do within the environment. Now, it can be an individual's goal to make sure that they really build that value, and really educating the higher level leadership within dealerships and dealer groups of the value of organic traffic and the value of increasing that organic traffic can build that relationship and hopefully keep the agency or the individual around for a long time to help them build it.
Very good. Now, Bill, I know that you and the team here have prepared some best practices and tips and insights for our dealers to help take away some of the mystery of building a solid SEO foundation. But would you have a couple of tips right now that you would want them to think about, or things that they should just be sure to know or go study on their own?
Yeah, so I guess there's two things that I think are important takeaways for SEO. And the first, they both kind of tie back to that while SEO can be really unique and very difficult, and there's a lot of technical aspects to it, at a dealership level, especially in today's world with a lot of the website providers being so strong, the content that you build is the key to separating you from the competitors. So having the quality page content, not just on the home page, but on the SRPs and on the specials pages, on the parts pages and the why buy pages, etc., really making sure that you have unique, in-depth content about why each one of those pages would serve value to a consumer. And then making sure that content is first focused towards the consumer, because Google is starting to understand intent, and they know when you're keyword stuffing or you're putting in links that shouldn't be there. So we need to write as if we're writing to our consumers. And if they find this page and read it, we want to make sure it provides true value to them or gives them a direction on the next step. So writing, I guess the first takeaway would be the simplicity of content, making sure that it's still there, that you're really building great content. The second takeaway is something that we focus with a lot of our dealers, is the consistency with the name, address, and phone number alignment across the web. And I mentioned that earlier, making sure that the dealership's brand and the contact information is consistent. And that's not just Google on Google My Business and not just Bing on Bing Places and Yahoo, but that's all the different directories that are out there. There are hundreds of directories that consumers still go to. While Google is the king, and they still drive the vast majority of the traffic, they scour all these other sites for consistency as well, even if the consumer doesn't. But this means making sure information is accurate across MapQuest and Bing and City Search and Mantra and all these different ones that are out there. There are numerous tools that can help you do it. If you have the staff, some of it can be accomplished on a manual basis. Now, it can be very tedious. I would recommend employing a third-party tool to do it, but that can be very beneficial. And most of the studies that come out from search engine experts show that alignment across those different networks is very high on the rankings for search signals.
Thanks for all of that. If SEO and Google Analytics was difficult for some dealers to embrace. So is social media.
Yeah.
So when we think about, I like the way his eyes lit up right there. So when we think about social media, like, can you help dealers understand the importance of social media as it relates to SEO?
Yeah, and that's something that I guess it's not new anymore, but in the past 5 or 6 years, Google has essentially made an effort to say that it is important. And I'm not sure if dealers and agencies for that matter have really taken true advantage of that. Now, the social media landscape has changed drastically, especially in the past 10 years, but even in the past 5 or 6 years, to where the organic content that's posting on there doesn't serve as much value for the page itself as it used to. You're not getting as many likes and comments anymore. Obviously, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn have algorithms now that decide the order of which things get shown and if they're shown or not. But it is important to understand that having that other third-party site, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, and having great content that's tied back to the dealership and links back to the dealership is another signal that ties back to quality SEO. That's not just for social media as well, that's for reputation. So obviously most of those sites have reviews and ratings. Facebook, of course, has reviews and ratings, but Google My Business and Yelp and all these different tools that are out there, it kind of intermingles on the line between reputation and social media, but all those are also search signals as well.
But it's so scary because I don't want things out there. I want to just like keep everything right here, and I want to keep everything nice and tight. And I already didn't like all of this, and now I've got all of that. You're telling me that's actually important to me selling cars?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So review rating, review count, the frequency of reviews, if you're responding or not. That's not just great for customer service, but that's great for Google as well. So while it can be cumbersome to think of all these different things that at one point in time, maybe just 10 years ago, they were kind of siloed in their own, and okay, well, you have a bad online reputation, whatever, but that affects, the likelihood that you're going to show up high in search too. So it's really tying together today.
What kind of education internally at the dealership right now are you providing for dealers to get their arms around it and then penetrating all the way through their teams so that they understand this well?
Yeah, so we have a couple different ways that we educate our dealers. One of the first ones is any dealer that's on our SEO platform or paid search or any kind of marketing platform that we have, we really make an effort to educate on the reporting and the results that we're providing them. We don't just want to sit in front of a screen or sit at a table and point out numbers and charts and graphs and say everything's going up, it's fantastic. We really want to educate them on why we're pointing at those charts and graphs and why these are the metrics that we're pointing out or why these are the keywords that we're pointing out. So we do a very tactical approach to consulting with our dealerships, with our reporting and with the campaigns that we're building. And that's kind of built into the structure of our current SEO strategy and how we deliver to our dealers. We also do have coaching that's standalone that encompasses SEO as well. So our coaching can cover anything from SEO to paid search to CRM optimization to phone skills. So we, depending on
the full range.
Right, depending on what the dealership needs and what opportunities they might have, we make sure to design a curriculum. Most of it is virtual, to where we're working with dealers on a similar basis to this, and it's all followed up with white papers and various webinars and video snippets to help the dealer stay on top of the current environment.
One of the things that I've appreciated about your organization most over the years is your hand-to-hand, your high touch with your customers. And I worked for 2 organizations that had Maritz SFE program over the years, and one was a Pontiac Cadillac store back in Portage, Michigan, and one was a Chevrolet store in Grand Rapids, Michigan. There was a lot of different years in between there where it's in Chicago and Boston, but that's a long story. But your team, you hold your team to a high set of standards. How do you keep your team up to speed that's going to go out there and talk to the dealers? Do you face some of those same challenges yourselves with getting everybody up to speed?
Oh my gosh, the challenges I think in the digital marketing space today are amazing. And I personally find it very enjoyable, but it can be difficult for everybody to stay on top of it. So what we do is we have, of course, most of us are located here in the St. Louis area, and oftentimes I'll read an article or watch a webinar, and I'll jump over to so-and-so's cube and say, hey, did you read that thing that Google just did or Bing just did, whatever it might be. So obviously some of those ad hoc things are really important, and they happen on a daily basis. But weekly we have team meetings to where we are reviewing the changes in the industry. All of us follow different industry journals online or different articles that we read and we bring something to the table every week. A lot of times it's something quite simple. Did you hear about this minute change that happened? What does it mean to us? Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes they're very broad. And a lot of times in those conversations, we'll start to dig into, well, how are we going to represent this when we speak to the dealer next week or later today or tomorrow?
Because you got to bring it home.
Right.
Yes.
And how is this going to tie back to driving traffic to a dealer website? And how is that going to tie back to selling more cars? And that's a conversation that we're having on an ongoing basis. We work with not only my team, which is the team of marketing analysts, but we work with our dealer consultants as well to make sure that those folks that are working in the CRM understand what we're doing and we understand what they're doing. So when we do have those conversations with dealers, we have a more well-rounded point of view of what's happening.
Very good. And so when you go out there, like, what's a normal arc for somebody to A, start to understand and embrace this, but B, start to see results? I say this because I might have been in a dealership or two where they're like, we flipped on an SEO campaign, and then like 5 minutes later, they're like, we're throwing those guys. I mean, that's never happened, right?
Oh, that happens every day.
That's never happened. But so what would be, though, like some things that would be like good indicators that it was going right? And what would be a good timeline?
Right. So, and I feel like a broken record, but it does depend. There's a lot of variables.
It depends is the answer. We're just going to keep that scrolling across the bottom of the screen.
Right. There are a lot of variables in SEO success. One of the variables is the quality of their current SEO strategy. So if they're coming from something to where they're already blogging, they're writing great content, they have great consistency across the board, that's definitely, the success level there is going to be a little bit more difficult to reach a high peak because they're already on their way to it. And if you're an agency that's taking that over, you just want to continue that trend. The other spectrum would be either a brand new website or a website that wasn't performing very well in the search engine rankings.
Okay.
Those actually, you can see metrics that show performance increases a little bit faster because you're kind of starting from an area that you're lacking in already. Now, in terms of timeline, it really kind of depending if you're on the really good side and you're just increasing the quality of your SEO content or increasing the pace of it. A lot of times it's measured in weeks and months. Dealers obviously love days. How many leads did we get today? How much traffic did we get today?
Tell me what's happening right now.
Right. It's very rarely that SEO can be measured in a series of days after something is implemented. One thing that we do, and most of the agency partners that I've seen out there do as well, is from day one, they start to do year-over-year reporting.
Okay.
The hope is obviously we have the access to that and making sure that we can measure what was happening last year at the same time. And the purpose of that is to avoid things like seasonality and trends in the industry that are happening just this year, but not last year, and making sure that we can see what's happening. But in terms of measuring success in a timeline, it's always difficult, but we always try to search for, a month or 2 months or 3 months out and look for that great trend.
Right. No, it's just tricky because, a lot of folks are living and dying by the end of the month, which is something we'll keep talking about here. And I think it's interesting even that some of the manufacturers are changing up the way that they do reporting. But it's really important to not treat SEO this way. You're going to spend some time getting it there. You're going to spend some time choosing the right partner to make it happen, or getting your people trained with the right attributes and talents and skills to do it. Then you're going to start baking it, and then it's just going to take a while, but you've got to let it go to get the best results. Don't pull it out of the oven too quickly.
Right. And that's why we call it a foundation too. We actually have a scorecard that we run for all of our dealers, and we call it the foundational SEO scorecard.
I like that.
And the purpose of it is really to show that you have the right foundation to build from. You're not building a skyscraper, but you're building a foundation for something that you hope becomes a skyscraper. So a lot of these things are very important to building that strong foundation.
You mentioned website just a minute ago, and I know our time's starting to run out here, but website, how important is the actual framework, the actual website itself, to solid and successful SEO?
Very important. Yeah. So
Tell us about that.
How the websites currently look and how Google looks at them is they're looking at a lot of usability standards, making sure that if a consumer were to come to this website, would they find the appropriate content in the appropriate amount of time without diverting to the wrong page or leaving out the site in general? So the general usability of a site is very important to Google, and obviously a consumer, making sure that we're getting to inventory, getting to service schedulers, whatever it might be. There's also some different things within website structure and framework that the web providers are building in today and is important. And a lot of this is markup. So markup is a way for web providers to speak almost directly to a search engine through the HTML. Within a lot of this markup, you have your hours and your directions and your products and departments and things like that. And almost all the major web providers today have that built into the different pages.
Okay.
That's just a kind of a few things to name, but there are also a couple other things within markup. There's one called breadcrumbs, which is actually kind of showing how the site is designed. And then as a consumer were to go on this page, what's the logical previous page, what's the logical next page? And what that can do is that obviously can help the consumer understand what they're doing, but that can help Google, Yahoo, and Bing understand what pages are most important based on the query that they typed in with Google. Because if you look at the search results back in the day, 5, 10 years ago, a lot of the deep linked pages in a dealership's website were not the ones that were showing on the first page of Google. They might have just been the home page. Okay. But if you look at them today, the more queries that are searched, the more in depth that Google knows about it, they can deep link into a website, and things like markup and breadcrumbs and the overall structure of those websites really help Google understand that. So
just when we told you we're going to take away the mystery and make it easier, we just threw a whole lot of extra stuff at you. But I want you to know that Bill and the team have spent time and effort putting some helpful material together for you. So you're going to be able to download that material after this webinar and our podcast, however you happen to be consuming this fun information today. But I want you to know, Bill shares my passion for you and for success to be there. He even is a little nerdy like me and reads digital marketing magazines on the weekend, we found out. So, like if you're bored this weekend, maybe you could do a chat session with Bill while he's on a digital marketing magazine session. But I want you to know, this is the kind of people that we want to make sure are in front of you and helping you and educating you. You deserve this. So many of us are spending time and money and energy trying to get to the next place, and no one stopped to tell us what it is we actually had to do today or find a path to get us there. So we are going to chip away at it one topic at a time, and after we chew through the first 37 that we have on the list, we're going to go back and we're going to hit some more, and we're going to keep this material fresh for you. But Bill, if people wanted to get a hold of you here at Maritz, if they want to reach out to you directly, how would they do that?
Well, the easiest way obviously is email. My email is bill.jackson@maritz.com. But I am active on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So on Twitter,
We're connected.
Yeah, on Twitter and LinkedIn, I believe my handle is the Bill Jackson. I know it sounds a little bit pretentious, but there's a lot of them, so I wanted to make sure I was the Bill Jackson. So
we were talking about a lot of David Hudson's. Hello, David Hudson, last night. So yeah, that's so the Bill Jackson at LinkedIn or Twitter.
Correct.
Bill.Jackson@Maritz, which is MARITZ.com. And we want to thank you. It's been a ton of information, and I think we've got a lot of answers, but I think it also sets us up for the next conversation.
For sure.
So dealers, start taking a close look at your team, start taking a look at who's taking this traffic or who's handling this SEO initiative at your store. How do you determine what the right marketing agency is to take your situation on and your exact company with all the wonderful things that make you uniquely you and your customers? Give them that great experience right from the beginning. So Bill, thanks a bunch. We'll talk again. Would that be okay with you?
Fantastic.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening in to another episode of Transforming Automotive. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. Check us out at www.fosterstrategiesgroup.com or transformingautomotive.com. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.